Thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is James Chang, and I'm Director of the Duck Career Network with the University of Oregon Alumni Association. Along with me today is my colleague, Megan McKinney, who is Associate Director of the Duck Career Network. Together, we are really thrilled to be able to join you today. Even though we are social distancing, it's great to have community via this webinar. We are super excited to provide this webinar to you and moderate a discussion among 3 alumni who embody the Ducks Help Ducks for Career Success mindset. Not only did they graduate into down economies, they've since lived and worked through other economic downturns. For those facing the job search today, whether you just graduated or you found yourself back on the job market for whatever reason, these can be extremely stressful times. You might even think that bad luck put you in this difficult situation that others can't relate to. In actuality, economic downturns happen every 8 to 10 years, it seems. We may not be able to anticipate the reason for the shift, but economic cycles have both ups and downs. Because you can't avoid these, one way to cope is to learn from the experience of others who have lived through the downs. We are so fortunate today to have these 3 alums join us to share their experience and insight. Eddie graduated from the U of O's MBA program into the recession of the early 90s. And then he lived through the recessions of the early 2000s and the one that started in 2008. Elena graduated from the UO's Clark Honors College around the time of the 2008 recession, came back to grad school, and then graduated when the economy was still struggling to recover. Todd graduated with his bachelor's degree from the UO in the early 90s and pursued work in the real estate and finance areas. Both were hard hit through all 3 economic times. All 3 Ducks have generously agreed to share their stories of resilience and persistence and their advice for you to rise above these difficult times to find both personal and professional success. We're excited to start this program, and let me introduce and pass the baton to my colleague Megan McKinney to give you an overview of our agenda and to start the questions.
Thank you, James. And if you can advance to the next slide. All right, so here's what this evening is going to look like. We're going to start with some facilitated discussion among our panelists for approximately half an hour, followed by answering questions from our viewers. If you have a question that you would like to submit to our panelists, please do so in the chat box below. We are going to try our best, time permitting, to get all of your questions answered at the end. So I would like to first start off by asking each of our panelists to share a little bit about their time at the UO. And why don't we kick it off with Elena, followed by Eddie, and then Todd.
Great, thank you. So as James shared, I came to the U of O initially for undergrad and did the Honors College as well as a sociology degree, and really just fell in love with the campus. I honestly never thought I would leave California. So I'm from Central California. I loved it there and came on a tour. And as I joke with my family, was basically forced on a tour of the U of O and took, 10 steps on campus and realized this is where I wanted to be. Just the beauty of the campus, the people were so nice. I also happened to be here on a sunny day, so I really didn't know what I was getting into with the rain. But truly loved the campus atmosphere. And as I continued at U of O, was able to learn just this spirit of connection, the spirit of taking care of each other, the spirit of working together that happens at the U of O. And it may happen at other universities. I have no idea, because as you can see, I did both of my degrees here. And really that's because I felt that this organization, this school, was able to provide those opportunities, those resources to me for both my undergrad and graduate degrees. So I I came back after a couple years off and did the Master's of Public Administration as well as nonprofit management degrees. And to be honest, I have never really left campus. I'm now on faculty in the Planning, Public Policy, and Management Department, and really, truly love the University of Oregon. I've loved my time here. You know, I don't know who's on the call today, but I spent a very short amount of time on the crew team at one point in time. It was a great chance to meet people and learn that waking up at 4 in the morning was not my cup of tea. But went on to be involved with just the Craft Center and different organizations in the community. The U of O has been a way that I've been able to be connected and get connected beyond what I think I could have ever imagined. So I'm excited to be talking today about how the U of O creates those connections, creates that network, how we can support each other, and how we can do so even in downtimes. You know, I graduated in both of the times I graduated and came to school were down Economies, and coming out of those, looking at and looking for jobs, trying to figure out how do you take this degree and turn it into something that even remotely reaches that career goal that you had. How do we adjust expectations? So I'm excited to talk a little bit about that today and share more with you about my time at U of O. I'll kick it to you, Eddie.
Thanks, and thanks Megan and James for inviting me to come on and be a part of this. It's very exciting. I graduated with my MBA from the University of Oregon in 1993. So to you 2020 grads, I'm sure that seems like the Stone Ages, but hopefully we can convey some good insight despite our age and experience. You know, like Elena was saying, I was really drawn to the campus and the beauty, and I was looking for a chance to get away from Southern California at the time. The thing that I remember, the reason I chose the U of O MBA program, and obviously this doesn't apply to everybody, but the head of the MBA program at the time actually took the time to call me and tell me that I was accepted. And I thought that was really cool. I got accepted to a few other programs. They just sent me a letter. And I think that was a good representation of what I took away from the program beyond the education, was the intimacy of the campus, even though I don't know what the size of the campus is now, but our MBA program at the time was around 125 people, whereas the Harvards and the Dukes and things like that have hundreds of people, maybe even 1,000 people, some of them. I really got to know everybody in the program. 40% of our students in the class were international students. I learned so much from listening to Japanese students in class and European students in class and Chinese students. I think as much as I learned from the professors, I learned from other students, and hopefully that's been the case for you guys too. And as you go forward, remember those classmates, remember those fellow alumni, because they will be a part of your life for the rest of your life. I just had my 25-year reunion of our graduating class and got to see half of our students come back to campus 25 years later, and it was like time had stood still. I mean, I just reconnected with them just like we were still in class. And it's a really special bond that you create while you're at school and as you're exiting school. So leverage that as you go forward, and don't lose touch with people, because just like they're your everyday friends now, they can be an important part of your community as you go forward. And of course, Oregon is where I developed my love of craft beers and good coffee, and all those crappy tastes I had in Southern California became refined in the state of Oregon, and I continue that 25 years later as well. But I look back at my time fondly, and one of the best things I've done with my life, and look forward to chatting more with you guys.
Okay, I guess I'm last. This is Todd Gooding, and I just got to the U of O a little later. I went to junior college first, so I didn't get the traditional experience for getting in the dorms and meeting all your friends the first 6 to 8 weeks. I kind of had to integrate a little bit. And I have to say, every person I met was extremely super welcoming. I ended up rushing to fraternity my sophomore year, which was an experience into itself. Getting going to football games in the late 80s, early 90s was more about the experience than winning. And I truly cherish that experience. And I was never the best student at Oregon. In fact, I didn't get into the business school until the second quarter of my senior year. I just kept taking classes because I knew I wanted to have a finance major, but I could never get in. And finally, the dean of the school, took pity on me as I was telling him I'm about to be finished with school, and he went ahead and admitted me, and then I graduated 2 quarters later. So, and I've taken that welcoming experience that I got from both the teachers at the business school and everybody that I met on campus, and I've really tried to extend that to people after a graduation. And anytime a U of O graduate calls me or needs assistance or something of that nature, I always return the phone call no matter what, and try and help where I can. And it's been, I met my wife there. She's also a duck. Her dad was a duck. I have a son that's a duck. So it's been a truly rewarding experience and a very meaningful part of my life. As a result of those 3 years in Oregon.
Thank you so much, Todd. I think all of you can tell that we have 3 fantastic speakers lined up for you this evening. Their heart, their spirit is in support of the Duck community, the University of Oregon. And so if you haven't already begun to, feel free to enter some of your individual questions into the chat feature. For the next question, getting a little bit more into the meat of our discussion, each of our grads graduated into a tough economy. They were tough in different reasons, in terms of the context, but also for their own individual situation. So if each of you can describe what it was, what were you facing as you were ready to leave school? So for this one, Eddie, if you could please kick us off, and then maybe after Eddie, let's go with Todd, and then wrap it up with Elena.
Yeah, so 1993, 94 was a tough time. As James said, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. You're going to have cycles in the economy, and you're going to have some down times and up times, and hopefully you can take advantage of the up times, but learn something from the tougher times. And I struggled. I think it took me about 7 or 8 months to find a job that I felt was appropriate for a graduating MBA. But in the meantime, I had to find a job, and I needed a car, so I ended up selling used cars in Seattle. Not a job that I really wanted to do, but it paid the bills, and it gave me a car to drive, which I needed. And I learned something, and beyond making money, it gave me some sales skills, which I really didn't have at the time. And those sales skills ended up helping me further down the road in different marketing positions that I had. So I think, the number one thing is, just because the economy is tough, you have to work a little bit harder. But I think when you work a little bit harder, it creates opportunity. All downtimes, I mean, you can look at it from the view of a stock market. When you have a down stock market, that's where the opportunities are, right? So I think down economies are an opportunity to stretch your muscles a little bit, add some learning to your skill set. Right now, there's a ton of free or inexpensive classes through LinkedIn and Udemy and Skillshare. So as much as you've learned over the last 4 years, or if you're graduating with a master's, two years, you can build on that. You can keep learning. So I think it's something I've tried to do, whether times are good or not, whether I'm working or not, is continue to kind of bolster my knowledge, bolster my skill set, so that when things are down, you have a little bit more flexibility and weapons in your arsenal that you can apply. I don't recommend you all go out and start selling cars. It wasn't my favorite job in the world, but it was a learning experience. So I'd say just keep building the tools in your arsenal so that when the opportunities arise, you're better each time for it.
Thanks, Eddie. Yeah, this is Todd again. I would say that, I graduated in 1990, 91, and I wanted to get into the real estate business. And at that time, we were coming off, more so than any other sector of the economy at that time, the real estate business was probably in the worst shape out of any industry in the country. And, people say, offer to do internships and informational interviews, try and get your foot in that way. Everybody that I talked to at that time said, Todd, there's nothing for you to do for free. There's no work. So similar to Eddie, I was a little humble, and I decided I needed to make a living. And I started selling life insurance in my, I moved back into my house with my parents and started selling life insurance for New York Life. And New York Life, the way they train their salespeople, it's very formulaic. You make this many calls, you get this many appointments, you get this many, opportunities to present, and it's a very formulaic way to do it. And to be honest with you, that was and the people skills that I had to develop were extremely helpful to me. And so that was a tough time, but I did it, and I made Rookie of the Year a couple times. And while I was doing it, I just decided that, okay, I'm in this. Nobody is going to outwork me. Nobody. And so finally the residential real estate market started to come around, and I got a job as a residential appraiser, another job I didn't want, but that led to a commercial real estate appraiser job, which is another job I didn't want, and that led to a commercial real estate analyst, and it kind of led to where I am today. And so I just took everything as an opportunity to, how do I develop whatever I'm doing right now into where I want to go. And that was the thing I really developed, not having a job right out of school, or even being able to focus on what my salary is going to be. It was more focused on, where do I want to go and how do I get there, and what steps do I need to take to do it.
Awesome. Thanks, Todd. So I graduated both times into down economies. And part of that is because I started school at the point of crashes. And so I think my two different experiences were very, very different. They did not have any correlation. And I think that's because out of undergrad, I was really fortunate that I had worked at a nonprofit during the summers and had an opportunity to get a full-time job. And so very early on, I had that job lined up out of undergrad. And I don't think I knew at the time how lucky I was, because I didn't understand what was happening in the economy. I was not paying close attention, all of those things that we just sort of overlook. I was doing that. And I was doing it so much so that even as I continued in that job, I got to a point where it just didn't feel like the right job anymore. And so I decided that I was going to quit that job and move to Portland, because Portland sounded like a really fun place to live. At the time, we used to jokingly refer to Portland as the place where young people go to retire. And so I thought that sounded pretty good. And I moved to Portland in September of 2008. And I moved there approximately 3 days before the economy took an incredible nosedive. And it was a nosedive. I mean, like, it was unpacking all of my stuff, turning on the news and seeing this happen before my eyes. So all of a sudden, this great place that young people went to retire no longer had jobs. So my introduction to understanding the economy was really at that point in time. That was when I understood that I couldn't just apply to jobs that it was a stretch for me, or that would be a great career opportunity or be a great career move. I very quickly had to start applying to anywhere and anyone who had anything open. So that was when I landed myself in a catering job. And as I think Todd and Eddie both said, not my favorite job. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about events and behind the scenes and the people that are working at those events. And I hugely respect them. I think much more than I ever understood. But that was really the driver for me to go back to school and to come back to the U of O to get my master's degree. And in showing up here that second time, because I really feel like I didn't quite take advantage of everything in my undergrad, was to show up and make sure that I used the learning opportunity to connect with as many people as possible, as many organizations as possible. I felt that my whole job was to get as many things on my resume while I was in school as possible. And so I did that. And I interned like you wouldn't believe. I was willing to work for free. I was, preferred if people wanted to pay me. But it was an opportunity that I felt so worried about being in that position of not getting a job that I worked overtime to make sure that I had connections and experience and could try on different types of jobs. So when I got to a point of graduation, I started out again. We were not in the clear. We were not at a point that there were a bunch of them. So graduating into an economy like that for me meant I had an ideal job that I wanted, but I might not be able to get it immediately. And so all of my professors, they knew what I was looking for. My friends, Eddie talked about the connections that you make in college. These are the people who you will continuously come back to. It's true. My cohort, we're all still connected. These are folks who are executive directors, development directors, they're business owners all over the country. And so we continue to stay connected. And in that time, we were able to share with each other the jobs we were finding for our specific interests. And it turned out that I had multiple people find a job that they thought I was qualified for, that I would never have clicked on, I would never have even looked at. And so I think that was, it ended up being an incredible experience. It was the right job. I had a chance to work at United Way here. And I'll talk a little bit about that more later. But I think ultimately graduating into a tough economy taught me to be more open about the ideas of the types of jobs that I would take. It taught me to explore avenues and organizations and work that I otherwise would not have. I had this whole idea of what a career trajectory would look like and the type of work that I do and things that I wasn't willing to do, and ended up doing all of those things that I said I wasn't willing to do and loving them and finding ways that they've taught me so much over the years and continued to teach me. So I think those are some of the takeaways, that while it's difficult, I think these are the opportunities, these are the times that allow us to expand our view, to sort of zoom out a little bit and try on something new, even if that means, it's a job that helps you pay the bills. It's a job that somebody finally said, sure, come here. We've got a place for you. That doesn't mean it's a lesser than position, because every job has an opportunity in it. And I think that's where, if you look at those opportunities as opportunities, I think those are the ways that we can really start to think about tough economies being a learning a learning opportunity for us, or a way to try on something that we otherwise would not have tried on.
Thank you so much. We're going to move to our next question for the panel. And that question is, can you tell us about your experience living and working through other tough economic times post-graduation, years after you've left the UO? If any of you have something you'd like to touch on in regards to that, I would love to start with Todd, and then maybe move to Elena, and then Eddie.
Yeah, thanks, Megan. I would say that my experience, and I've had a few very tough times. I've been with the same firm now for 25 years, and in 2008, 2009, we got rocked. It was brutal. And I found myself looking at my phone all of the time, responding to crises, getting wound up so tight on things, 10, 11, midnight, still working on trying to work issues out. And I found that I really needed a place to just release and not in a logical way to do that. And I found myself going to church just to have an hour where I wasn't focused on my phone, and I was just have myself with my own thoughts. And I think that just finding some time to set aside and reflect is extremely important. And then the other thing that I found myself really doing is, look, sometimes you get a problem that's so big, so monumental, and it can feel so overwhelming. And how do I get through that? And you really have to focus on the small successes, and a lot of 2 or 3 small wins or accomplishments can lead to, builds momentum and can get things going. And so don't be afraid to tackle a problem, but do it in bite sizes, not trying to take on something all at one time. And then the last thing, that I've kind of really come to grips with, especially in tough times, is just because you get rejected on something, that has zero impact on the next person that you're talking to, unless you let it get in the way of the next person that you're talking to. And so it's something you really got to keep in mind as you're trudging through trying to get an interview or get it's your body language and your demeanor on the phone and your demeanor in the email. You cannot let them think that you're defeated. And so those are some of the things that I've really taken away, and things that I've been able to get through these tough times, is because it's some of those smaller bite-size attempts to win.
I love that. Totally agree. I think some of the things that I would add to this about living and working through tough economic times, I think some of the things that we're seeing now, especially, but even through the last couple of downturns, is people sort of hunkering down. And some of the behaviors, I'm a wealth advisor now, which if you had told me that when I graduated in 2006 with my sociology degree, I would have told you were out of your mind. There's no way I could do that job, but I'm doing it now. And I think one of the things that I see from this position, and from having sort of built up to this position over the last number of years, is learning about how do people react during stressful times. I got into this because I started working with low-income families, helping them get to the end of the month with money left over, and figuring out how do you live on the most extreme version of a budget, and seeing that it's possible, and seeing that when it's possible, we are able to reclaim that dignity and that strength and that grit that we have. And so I think the experience of living through these types of economic times, or when you hear people talk about, you know, we're living through history, we're seeing history unfold before us, those are opportunities that I see to look around and see, what are people doing? How are they acting? How are they taking chances? How are they choosing not to take a chance and play it safe? And I think both of those things are okay. And both of those things are great in certain situations for certain people and for what you need during these times. I think when I think about the sort of advice on how we do this, it's to really pay attention to those, to what you're experiencing, pay attention to what works. So like Todd talked about, finding those touch points that help you feel grounded, or help you feel like you can get away from the craziness, because I think that's one of the things that starts to happen is we start to have those conversations that just feel a little bit crazy. And we spin each other up. We are a storytelling people, and so therefore we tell stories, and they get bigger as we continue them. And so I think keeping in mind and understanding that living through these times are an opportunity to reflect, to try something new, or hunker down, whatever feels right in the moment. And I've done both, and I think it's figuring out what's right for you in that moment.
Awesome. I love both of what Todd and Elena mentioned. I'll try to not be redundant, but I'd say two words come to mind as I think about working and living through tough economic times. One is empathy. Being empathetic to those around you, those who might be working for you, those you're working with. As tough as this is for you, there are probably people who are having even tougher times. So understanding that and empathizing, doing the volunteer opportunities, because I think sometimes we get so caught up in like, oh, I'm worried about my job, or man, the rent's going up and I might not be able to make it this month. And of course we have to take care of ourselves, but it's important to still do those volunteer things if that's important to you. Still talk to other people, still offer other people advice like what we're doing here, and your thoughts, because that's when other people need it the most. And I think it's just really important to be empathetic to people in other situations. You know, what happened in Minneapolis last week, or it's just affecting so many people of all different colors and socioeconomic classes in so many different ways, that I think it would be very unique to be in an office environment, if we were going into offices right now, where that wouldn't be affecting people. So you have to understand that different people are responding in different ways and be empathetic to that. If you're a marketer, you can't be just putting out a press release right now, because you have to understand that people are worried about different things. So as both from a business standpoint as well as a personal standpoint and relationship standpoint, being as empathetic to what's going on and the tough times that people might be facing, I think is really important. The second piece I'd add is take care of yourself. You know, we get so caught up in, oh my God, I don't know when the job's going to happen. I don't know if this is the right job, or what if I lose my job? And we spend so much time worrying about things that are somewhat out of our control, that we forget to take care of ourselves. And all of a sudden we're sleeping 5 hours instead of 7.5 or 8 hours, where we're skipping those workouts. You work through lunch, and all of a sudden that's not healthy. So, you know, I've been calendaring, because I'm working from home a lot right now. I've been calendaring things like stretching and yoga and going for that walk around the block, the exercise, even though the gym is not open right now. And those are really important during these tough times, because if you don't take care of yourself, when things get a little bit better, you're not going to be ready. You're not going to be ready to take on those new opportunities as they come along. So be empathetic, take care of other people, but also take care of yourself, because there are things that are much more important than what the next job is, or how much you're going to get paid, or whatever the case might be. Those are not unimportant. But your health is important, your family is important, your friends are important. So take care of those things that matter.
Thank you so much.
And Eddie, that is a perfect segue to our next series of questions focused on insight and advice for all who are watching this, whether they're a recent grad or a recently job shifting duck. So with these questions, we'll just have one of you address them so that we can get closer to the questions that are being posed by the audience. So on the topic of tips.
Sorry if I tread on somebody else's answer there.
No, all good advice. So specifically on taking care of yourself during challenging times, we've heard great suggestions from Eddie, but for this one, Todd, would you, again, and you reference a little bit of this in terms of how you balanced your own, the stress, the weight, but if there's anything else you would add to encouraging other people to take care of themselves during these challenging times. Oh, Todd, you're still on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, I would echo Eddie. You really got to exercise. And like I said, give yourself some time, some alone time. But also, I have found that especially talking with your peers, just kind of being open and honest about where you are. And don't be afraid to share those thoughts, because that is very therapeutic unto itself.
Great, thank you, Todd. For the next question, I'd like to pose this to Elena. So how can networking be a resource and a source of support for people? Again, we, especially in tough economic times, people can hear about network. It's really important, and that in many ways it's true. But also, what's realistic to expect, or maybe not so realistic to expect from your networking contacts?
Yeah, it's a great question. And this is one that I feel really passionate about, because I feel like my networks and my current network have been really the ones that got me where I am today and connected me to the people who I needed to be connected to. So I think networking, when people say get out and network, there's an assumption that networking automatically just equals new jobs, new opportunities, and all those things. And I think that can be true, but I also think that networking is more of a resource of figuring out who is in your world that has opportunities, that has information even to share or something to teach. And understanding, when we think about this question of what's realistic and what's not realistic when we're networking with contacts, I think one of the things that is realistic is the expectation of having a conversation, sharing knowledge, maybe sharing contacts and connections, making introductions. I think what is not realistic is an automatic job offer. And I think figuring out the balance of approaching people and having those conversations. If anyone out there is a reader and looking for a book recommendation, one of my favorites is the book called Do Over by Jon Acuff. And that book really, it has 4 parts that really talk about how do you identify your network and the value each person in your network plays. So really spending some time being strategic about that, being thoughtful about that, and intentional of why are you contacting this person? What specifically do they have that you're looking for? Or what can you learn from them? And I would also say, don't underestimate the power of an informational interview. Those are my favorite. I still conduct them even though I am fully employed. I love doing informational interviews just to learn what people do, how they got to their job, what their company does, because I think we can learn a lot about our own work or future opportunities or skills we want to be building, even if you are employed. So I think taking advantage of that network and talking to folks about what they can offer is a huge opportunity. And that's always an opportunity. That's an opportunity that's available to you in up, down, sideways, all kinds of economic times.
Excellent. Thank you, Elena. For the third question, I'd like to pose this to Eddie. What advice do you have for particularly the class of 2020, the members of the class of 2020? And in many cases, what you're going to share with them may also be relevant for any alum who's finding themselves back on the job market.
Yeah, just before I jump on that, I do want to just add something to what Elena said earlier. She said that we as humans are story machines. We love stories. And that's what I do as a career. I love working with businesses to help tell their stories and evolve their brand. And I think that's what you got to look at networking as. Yes, it's a chance to get a job. It's an informational interview. You're collecting information, but you're collecting stories. You're evolving your own stories, but you're also listening to the stories that other people have about their job searches or how they got going or why they love marketing. And those stories can just be so beneficial as you evolve your career and as you go through interviews and things like that. So really look at networking as a chance to collect stories and make it fun, because it can be a grind. As far as advice for the class of 2020, I have one big thing I'd like to talk about, and then I'll go through a little checklist. But the big thing, and it's something I've done recently in the last few years, when you go through business school and you do a marketing track, you learn about helping companies set vision and mission and brand. I think individuals should create their own vision statement. So what do I mean by that? Specifically, you're entering a time that you're going to be job hunting and you're after a certain thing 2 months down the road, 3 months down the road. Make sure you identify clearly in your mind, what does success look like for you? So that's writing down that vision statement for 3 months down the road, 6 months down the road, however long you want to take it, and stating in present tense, I am, for example, I'll give you some little text from mine. I'm a logic-driven person, but at the same time, I like to be creative. So my job has to represent that. I like structure and deadlines, but I am also an impulsive person. So these are things about me that need to relate to the job. So what does that turn to as far as potential outcomes within this vision statement? If you're in a job hunt, you're not just saying, I want to have a job 3 months from now, but you want to have a job that challenges you in a certain way. You might say you want to have a job at a large Fortune 500 tech company like a Google or a Facebook, or it might be that you really want to work with a startup and a small family-run company. Whatever it is, it's important that you write down those specifics in that vision statement, because otherwise you might be going after something that you get it and you're like, wait, that's not what I wanted. So take the time now to really try to identify. And it's not just about salary and job. It's about, what kind of lifestyle do you want? Do you want to work from home a lot? Do you like going into the office? Do you want to manage people, or would you rather be an individual contributor? All of those things can fall into your vision statement. And the more exact and specific you can make it, it's not like the job is going to perfectly match that. But when you see that right opportunity, you're going to know it because you've created this vision statement for yourself. So that's something I'm a big believer of. And I still do it all the time, and I'm constantly refining it and realigning it with different scenarios. But I highly recommend that. And if anybody wants help with that, I'm happy to help, offline if you want to ping me directly. Beyond that, just some checklist stuff that we've talked about already. Flexibility, be flexible. That job that gets offered to you, all three of us have taken on roles that weren't ideal, but we took it, we learned something, we grew. And then eventually you get to something hopefully better and bigger and closer to what you're looking for. Be creative. Everybody out there is on LinkedIn and sending applications online and all that. The more you can do to stand out and be creative. The first job I got out of grad school, beyond the selling the cars, I took Hershey's Kisses and I changed all the individual labels in the Hershey's Kisses to attributes about myself that were going to help me get this job. Now, in the time of COVID-19, that might not be a good thing because you're probably touching all the chocolates, but it got, I don't know if it got me the job, but it got me to stand out amongst other candidates. We've talked about this already. Be humble, just don't worry so much at the beginning about the exact salary you're going to make or the title. It may not match what you want, but you got to take some humility and kind of grow and evolve your career. Be passionate, whatever it is, understand what your passions are and try to drive passion within the jobs that you seek. Try to align with companies that have ethics and values that are close to your own. For me, it's really important that a company has a philanthropic mission as well beyond their profit seeking mission. At Cranium, when I was there, we used to donate a dollar for every game towards after-school arts programs, and I thought that was really cool. Do some things that scare you, like that's how you grow. Take some chances in your job or as you're searching for a job. Go on those speaking engagements, do panels, whatever you can do to put yourself out of your comfort zone, because that's going to get you out there, and those videos are going to get shown and people are going to be like, wow, hey, Elena, I saw that video. That's awesome. But you only get there by scaring yourself. You guys are graduating, but the learning is not done. You got to keep learning. You will keep learning for the rest of your life, from other people, from friends, from jobs, from your bosses, and from the people you manage. And then just take a moment, breathe. It doesn't have to all get done today. Take the time, enjoy the journey, and smell the roses along the way, because all of a sudden you're 40 or 50 or 60 and you're like, holy shit, what happened? So you got to enjoy the journey, because it's definitely a marathon, not a sprint.
Wonderful advice. Thank you so much. So for our viewers, that is at least the close of the structured question part. So with that, I will pass the baton to Megan, who will be posing some of the questions that you've asked. And if you still have questions, there's still time to add those into the chat box.
Yes, please go ahead and submit your questions that you have. I've got the chat box open, and so I'm looking at what's coming in. I'd love to share your question. We have a question that really any of you can jump in and answer. And this question is, what stands out about your job searches at any point throughout your career that you wish you would have done differently? And what would you be doing now if you were job searching again? So kind of a two-part question there. Would anyone like to kick off answering that?
I'd be happy to try that. What I always found frustrating is I would go for the one job interview that I really wanted, and I'd try and do that first. And that's always been a mistake for me. I need a little bit of practice. So I would try and line up an informational interview or some other type of interview for a job that you may or may not want, but at least it gives you a really good idea to practice and fine tune what you're, when you're ready for that job that you want.
I think one of the things that I would add, the embarrassing difference between the start of my cover letters to the end version of cover letters, I think really has changed over time. And I think now, having been on search committees, having been the person reading applications, one of the things, what would I be doing now if it was different, is making sure that you're framing your approach, whether it's a cover letter or trying to get in front of somebody, with the focus on that organization, and really identifying what they're looking for and identifying how you can bring that to the table. I think a lot of times what I've seen over the last few years, especially, and even over time, is when applicants come to an organization and say, this organization is going to do so much for me, instead of talking about what you bring to the organization. So I think my biggest advice for if I was job searching again is being really clear about what you bring to the organization, and making sure that you outline that. If you've got job experience that doesn't align with the job you're applying for, make sure you address it in the cover letter. So do things that help the readers and the people that are making the decisions get to the conclusion that you want them to. So it's a little bit about what Eddie talked about, of setting that vision, identifying your skills and what you bring to the table, and making sure that that's clear. I think the number one thing I've learned over the years is not letting other people define you, and you have that opportunity in a cover letter, even in your resume, finding ways to make sure that you're providing that connection for them.
Yeah, I don't have much to add there. I think something that was discussed earlier, Todd and I have both done sales. Just because you've gotten rejected or got turned down or didn't get a response, don't let that affect your next outreach, because that next person has no idea. Even if you got fired or whatever from your last job, the next person doesn't know that. So try to, kick yourself in the butt, pick yourself up, and put that best story forward. As Elena was saying, create that great presentation of yourself, that sales pitch of yourself, and don't worry about so much about that last job didn't go quite as well as you wanted, or that last interview didn't go quite as well as you wanted, because we've all had them. We've all had dud interviews. We've all had, some dud situations, and it's hard, but you've got to try to look forward with your most positive attitude, because that's all people see when you walk into the room or you're on the Zoom interview.
Great, thank you so much. That's some great advice right there. Here's an interesting question. One of our attendees asks, what advice do you have for maintaining your network? It can be easy for me to reach out to new people, but I really struggle with keeping in touch without feeling like a bother.
I think that's a great, it's a great question. And the fact that you're asking it, the fact that you're conscious of that or trying to be conscious of that tells me that your intentions with trying to reach out to somebody or connect with them probably isn't going to be a bother. And so I think going back to this idea of identifying really truly what are you after, asking permission for that. If it's somebody that you're reaching out to or would like to reach out to on a regular basis, I think after that first connection or those first couple connections, letting them know and saying, this has been really valuable for me. I've gotten a lot out of this. Would it be okay if I reached out to you quarterly, monthly, whatever that is that makes sense between both of you? I think that's a great way to just be upfront with that person and let them know that they're valuable. And if it's somebody you're trying to figure out how to do that, it's a check-in. It's saying, I'm really curious how, right now we've got an opportunity. It's a touch point that says, what is this looking like in your field of work? What does it look like in your line of work or in your office? So having that be an open conversation, and then again, asking that permission to continue contact, I think is a great way to encourage folks to ask them. People love sharing their stories. It's flattering. And so offering that opportunity is, it might be welcome.
I would say, this is Todd, I would say that, look, you don't need to try too hard, right? It's, people interact with you because they want to, and they do you a favor, but the follow-up on that is they want something from you and you offer something from them. And it's that interaction that I think really would allow, that's what you need to focus on, is making sure that the people that you need something from, how do you give them something to keep them engaged? And versus just having 500 people in your network. Focus on the guys that you really think can help you get somewhere, and how can I be helpful to them?
Yeah, the only thing I'd add to that, I think those are great points, is when you are with somebody, whether it be an informational interview or a real interview or whatever the case might be, really take the time to listen. The thing that, frustrates me, whether it be me being interviewed or interviewing somebody else, is where I feel like there's an agenda or some sort of, they're just out to get through their questions and they're not really listening to what I'm having to say. And as Elena said, we all love to tell stories. We all love to talk. We're all social beings, but nobody wants to talk if nobody's listening, right? So really take the time to listen, hear what they're saying, and then, if appropriate, ask questions back, because I guarantee if you do that, they will be happy to have lunch or coffee with you on a regular basis because they're getting something out of it as well.
Thank you, Eddie. Let's see, I do want to be mindful of time. Let's see if we can squeeze in one more, maybe two. I have a question here that's asking, how do you stay motivated to continue in a job that you might not enjoy in the moment?
I'll go back to my mention of having a vision. So you take that job for the moment, and it may not be perfect, but it's definitely giving you something. But have the vision for how you're going to try to expand the role while you have it and challenge yourself some more, or establish guidelines with your boss on how you want to evolve, or have the timeline that you're going to check out. Say, you know what, I'm going to do this for 12 months. I'm going to work as hard as possible for those 12 months, but then it's going to be time for me to move on. So I think if you have your vision and your end goals clearly outlined, that helps you get through those frustrating times of an ideal job.
I think the other thing I like to think about during those times are looking for volunteer opportunities in the community, looking for ways that you can build and grow your skill set and your resume creatively. And so finding organizations that you can volunteer with, or that people you can shadow that can teach you about a job that someday you want. Keep doing those informational interviews. So finding ways, you know, we're sitting here talking about the shiny aftermath, not the gritty rock bottom version of the story. But it's hard, and it's not, every day is not easy, and you will not love that job, and you'll not want to go in the morning, or, you know, whenever that job is happening. And so I think I love the idea of keeping that vision, finding things that are exciting for you, finding things that do help you feel motivated and proud of the work that you're doing, to keep going, I think is really important.
And I'll just add one little thing to all of that. And I would just say that it's so much easier to find a job if you already have a job. And so if nothing else, you keep the job that you're not happy with, because it'll help you find the next one.
Mm-hmm. Let's see if I can squeeze in just one more question here in the last couple of minutes, and maybe just one of you who might want to jump in and respond really quickly. This sounds like it might be a student. They're asking, or they say, I know I should be flexible with accepting that first job, expecting it not to be my dream job. With that said, should I be applying for jobs that are out of my comfort zone or not applicable to my majors?
I think that's a good question. I think you have to really just, each situation is different. You know, I fall back on what am I passionate about, even though the job may be out of my comfort zone, or it may be, you know, I think there was a question we may not get to. What if you have to change your career path at this point because your typical career is not, the industry is failing, and we're going to have to do that. You have to fall back on what are you passionate about? What can you commit yourself to? So even though the role might not be exactly what it is, you're able to apply yourself because you're passionate about the industry, or you're passionate about the team that you're working with. Find things that you are excited and driven by, and focus on those, and try to focus a little less on the less than ideal parts of the job.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Eddie. All right, it looks like we are at the close of our program. I just want to thank Elena, Eddie, and Todd. Thank you for sharing your stories about challenges that you've each faced graduating into recession, how you overcame those challenges through your resilience and your perseverance. We know there are ducks struggling right now, both among our alumni and our seniors who are about to graduate into an uncertain economy. And we hope that those who tuned in this evening will leave feeling perhaps less alone, and maybe with a renewed sense of motivation and inspiration. On the screen right now, you can find links to help direct you to ways in which you can stay connected with the UOAA through both events and social media, as well as some contact information for James and I. So with that, I just want to thank everyone for their time. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you to our panel. We hope that you'll join us for our next webinar. Good night, everyone, and go Ducks.